So this has to be one of the dumbest things I've ever read. Did the Apollo-era U.S. space program use any parts from previous launches on each stage of their Saturn rockets? Now that's a pretty good question. While we wanted to use, and pretty much always have wanted to use, reusable vehicles, we did not. But that's not what this is about. Dean here writes, no, but that's not to say there aren't some pieces still floating around in space. The first and second stages of the Saturn V rocket fell back to Earth. The third stage, called the S-4B, would have fallen back to Earth after placing the Apollo command service and lunar modules into a translunar trajectory to the Moon. That's what happened during the Surveyor program and Apollo missions that didn't go to the Moon. But for some reason, NASA sent the discarded S-4B on a similar trajectory to the Moon. That's not only completely unnecessary, he writes, it's also potentially dangerous to the mission. Sending the S-4B on this useless journey achieved three objectives. It provided a spacecraft that could be tracked while the Apollo command and lunar modules remained in the safety of a low Earth orbit. Okay. It allowed NASA to relay telemetry from Earth so that it appeared as if it originated from the Apollo modules. It ferried the unmanned Apollo lunar descent stage to the Moon, where NASA could soft land as evidence their missions had been successful, and this is the funny part, but we'll get back to that. He writes, where was Apollo 12 responsible for the... or why Apollo 12 was responsible for the failure of Apollo 13? NASA failed to land the Apollo 12 descent stage when the S-4B failed to arrive at the Moon on time, so there was no evidence that Apollo 13 was there. That's the real reason Apollo 13 had to fail, he writes. So, this is just the most ridiculous, maybe not the most, but one of the most ridiculous things. Now, it's one thing to hear someone denying the Apollo flights, denying that we ever went to the Moon. That's one thing. What this guy is saying is that, yes, we sent these vehicles to the Moon. We just didn't land a crew. It's like, what? Why? This is a whole other level of insanity. Now, I could understand why someone might believe we just didn't go at all and it was all fake. Obviously, it's false, we did. But I could understand why someone might be skeptical about this. What I want to know is why someone would think this is how it happened, that yes, we launched the crew into orbit, but then the command module docks with the lunar ascent stage, the cockpit, separates from the descent stage. The crew stays in orbit, and the S-4B takes the bottom half of the lander to the Moon, where it then lands. So what you're saying is, yes, we did land, just without anyone on board. It's like, why? Why would anyone think that's how you fake it? I mean, why? If that's how far you're going to fake it, why not actually do it? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's kind of funny, too. But anyway, the other part is this logic here. It reads, NASA failed to land the Apollo 12 descent stage when the S-4B failed to arrive at the Moon on time, so there was no evidence that Apollo 13 was there. That's the real reason it had to fail. So, but what's that got to do with anything? What's the Apollo 12? Because if you're faking each one separately, on the very flight you're doing it, so you launch it, and you send the bottom half of the lander to actually land, he says, what's Apollo 12 got to do with it? Because if Apollo 12 didn't fail, then Apollo 12 would be placing its descent stage, and as he states, soft landings. I've already went over that. So what's that got to do with Apollo 13? It's ridiculous. It's completely, even by his own logic, it doesn't make any sense. He's saying that each flight is basically doing everything except landing the crew itself. The funny part is there was actually an idea to land descent stages without an ascent stage for putting cargo down on the Moon. And it would still just rely on the normal Saturn V. Maybe you send the crew around the Moon too, you just don't land them. Or maybe you send it completely unmanned for more cargo. There are lots of ideas, and it's really interesting. So what he's saying would have actually worked by, actual plans. The funny part is, if you're going to go that far, why not just actually do it? Why not just actually land a crew? So what he's saying is, essentially, we developed the ability to land, we just never did it with a crew, which is utterly ridiculous. And this, like I said, this little bit of the logic doesn't make any sense. So if Apollo 12 was fake as well and sent its descent stage, as he outlines up here, that it ferries the unmanned Apollo lunar descent stage to the moon where it could soft land as evidence the mission had been successful. If Apollo 12 does that with its own ascent stage, what's that got to do with Apollo 13? If Apollo 13 has to launch and it's sent, what's Apollo 12 got to do with it? It should have been Apollo 13 that doesn't. So his own logic is garbage. And in two regards, his logic for how it was faked doesn't make any sense. I mean, yeah, that would actually be a pretty good way. That would, if you wanted to fake it, that'd be a pretty convincing way to fake it, because you're not faking it. The best way to fake something is to actually do it. But are you really faking it then? I say no. Anyway, just thought you might want to see this ridiculous. I mean, we could look into more of this guy's thoughts, but this sums it up pretty well. Anyway, well, thank you for watching, and try to have better logic than this, please.